didn't arrive here by accident. There is a pull, a silent magnetic thread that led you to this very moment, to these words and to this message. Not through logic, not through coincidence, but through something deeper, something that defies explanation and yet feels utterly true. A resonance that can only be recognized by the soul. Perhaps you've been feeling a strange sense of disconnection lately. Maybe nothing is inherently wrong, and yet everything feels slightly off, as if you're living a version of your life that was scripted by someone else. That unease is not dysfunction. It is the soul's whisper, and right now you're listening. There is a quiet truth moving through you. It is not here to shock you nor to shake you violently into awareness. It doesn't arrive with fireworks, epiphanies, or grand proclamations. It arrives as an echo, a subtle remembrance. It is the moment you stop running, stop chasing, and begin to simply be. This inner shift, this calling you feel, cannot be forced. It does not obey the linearity of time or the logic of the rational mind. It shows up when the soul is ready to reclaim itself. And you, dear reader, are ready. Not to become someone new, but to return to the one you've always been, underneath the noise, underneath the stories, and underneath the conditioning. It is not coincidence. It is communion. Real transformation rarely arrives with noise. The soul doesn't shout. It whispers. It speaks in pauses, in long silences, in the way you now find yourself uninterested in conversations that once consumed you. In the way you notice your energy receding from relationships, habits, and roles that no longer feel alive. You're not withdrawing because you're lost. You're realigning because you're waking up. Many people think spiritual growth is dramatic, that it involves sudden enlightenment, drastic life overhauls, or radical personality shifts. But true transformation is far more subtle. It happens quietly in the background. It's a rearrangement of your inner architecture, a dismantling of identities that were never truly yours. The shift doesn't demand attention. It only requires surrender. You're not here to become a different person. You're here to strip away everything that was never really yours. The masks, the roles, the expectations. The truth of who you are is not something to be created but remembered. Like a sunrise slowly dissolving the night, transformation creeps in gently. You begin waking up to yourself. You start to notice the gap between who you've been and who you truly are. You start to sense that the old identity is too tight, too limited, too small for the truth you're beginning to remember. The change is internal, invisible to most, but undeniable to you. Something strange begins to happen on this journey. One day, without planning it, you realize that the past no longer defines you. The story you've told yourself, the trauma, the accomplishments, the heartbreaks, the victories, it all begins to feel like a movie you once watched rather than a script you are still acting in. You can recall the scenes, the characters, the emotion, but the identity tied to them, it begins to fade. You are no longer the main character in that story. You are the observer, the witness. You don't hate your past. You don't worship it either. You simply see it for what it is, a chapter, not a cage. This quiet detachment is not denial. It's transcendence. It's not that you forget the pain or the joy. You just stop using them as proof of who you are. There is no longer a need to explain. No more justifying why you stayed, why you left, why you broke, or why you rose. You no longer try to translate your wounds for others to understand. You don't require their comprehension to validate your experience. You've shifted from narration to presence. You are no longer writing from your wounds. You're living from your wholeness. The past is still a part of your tapestry, but it no longer determines the pattern of your present. That is freedom. We are taught to build identities like fortresses. Strong, recognizable, admired. This is who I am, we say, pointing to a collage of achievements, aesthetics, behaviors, and beliefs. But what happens when the identity we've curated no longer fits? What happens when our soul demands more space? The pain you feel in these moments isn't failure. It's growth. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. What begins to fall away are the protections, the armor you wore to survive in a world that asked you to perform rather than be. The perfectionism, the pleasing, the proving they served their purpose. But now they are suffocating. You start to recognize that what once felt like stability was actually confinement. You stop investing in maintaining a fixed sense of self. You stop trying to stay consistent with an outdated version of you. Instead, you begin to let yourself evolve. And it's terrifying at first, because if you are not who you used to be, who are you now? The answer comes not as a concept, but as a presence. You feel it in the way you move through the world with less tension, less defensiveness, more openness. You stop trying to be somebody. You start allowing yourself to simply be. This letting go isn't a dramatic rejection of the past self. It's a quiet honoring. You bow to who you were. You thank them for getting you here. And then you release them, not because they were wrong, but because you've outgrown the need to wear their shape. As you deepen into your own presence, you begin to realize something miraculous. The things that used to trigger you don't anymore. Not because they disappeared, but because you are no longer bound to the same emotional loops. It's not that you suppress your emotions. It's that you've learned to listen to them without becoming them. You've begun to discern, is this emotion coming from the present, or is it a ghost from the past? Is this feeling true now, or is it an echo of an old survival pattern? You've stopped giving your energy to every impulse. You've stopped chasing closure, proving your worth, or demanding apologies. You don't need to be understood anymore. You only need to stay anchored in your own clarity. This non-reactivity is not coldness. It is mastery. It's the space between stimulus and response, the breath you take before replying, the pause that saves you from repeating an old wound. You don't explode. You don't collapse. You simply notice. And in that noticing, the old patterns lose their power. You see them for what they are: outdated programs running on a system that no longer serves your expansion. You don't need to fix them. You just don't feed them. This kind of emotional sovereignty is the beginning of real freedom. It's not about having perfect control. It's about no longer being controlled. It's subtle, it's silent, and yet it changes everything. At some point on this journey, an almost imperceptible but life-altering shift occurs. You stop needing to be understood. You stop needing to be seen to feel that you exist. The longing to be validated by family, friends, lovers, social media, society begins to dissolve, not through bitterness or disappointment, but through realization. You understand that validation is not inherently wrong. It is natural for a child to seek affirmation as they discover who they are in the world. But now you are no longer a child, at least not in the spiritual sense. You've tasted enough of the outside world to know that no external stamp of approval can ever affirm your soul's worth. When you no longer need others to validate your pain, your joy, your worth, you begin to walk differently in the world. There is a weight that lifts, a silence that enters. You stop explaining yourself in conversations. You stop defending your choices, your growth, your distance. You start to speak only when you have something to say, not when you feel obligated to justify your being. You stop asking questions just to be reassured. You stop seeking eyes that recognize you in order to feel real. You become your own witness. This isn't arrogance. It's sacred neutrality. It is the deep inner knowing that your worth doesn't fluctuate with others' recognition. It is the peace that comes from sitting alone in a quiet room and feeling whole, not because someone loves you, but because you finally love yourself in your entirety. As the need for external validation fades, something remarkable is born in its place: emotional sovereignty. You begin to realize that you can hold your own emotions without drowning in them. You start to see that emotional reactions are not facts, they are information. And you no longer treat them as directives. You stop identifying with the chaos of emotional storms. You stop reacting to every wave of feeling like it's a tsunami. Instead, you learn to watch the water rise and fall, knowing that you are the ocean, not the current. In the past, you may have felt consumed by sadness, anxiety, jealousy, or rage. They defined you. They dictated your decisions. You may have said things like, "I am anxious" or "I am angry," as if those emotions were permanent markers of your identity. But now you say, "I feel anxiety. I notice anger." You speak from awareness rather than identification. This gap between emotion and identity is liberation. You begin to give others the same grace. You no longer take their reactions personally. When someone lashes out, you don't immediately assume it's about you. You understand that they too are reacting from wounds, many of which have nothing to do with you. You stop taking responsibility for everyone's feelings. You stop managing everyone's perception. You allow people to be disappointed in you without crumbling. You let them misunderstand you without rushing to correct their narrative. You begin to understand emotional freedom is not detachment, it is embodiment. It is being so anchored in your truth that you no longer need to twist yourself to regulate others' comfort. From this space, you relate not from fear or need, but from presence. You offer love not from emptiness, but from overflow. And in that overflow, you begin to truly connect. As the dust of reaction settles and emotional sovereignty becomes your home, another shift takes place. You begin to feel guided not by your wounds, not by fear, not by expectation, but by something far deeper, the soul. It's not easy to describe this experience in language. It doesn't come as a loud voice or a glowing epiphany. It comes in the form of quiet alignment, a gut feeling, a sense of rightness, an inner movement that says this way even if your mind isn't sure why. You stop overthinking every decision. You stop making choices based on people-pleasing or fear of being left behind. You begin choosing based on resonance, what feels light, honest, and whole. The soul doesn't rush. The soul doesn't demand. The soul invites. And you've learned to listen. You stop planning your life in order to impress. You stop showing up in roles just to feel useful or important. Instead, you follow the thread of what feels meaningful. You let your curiosity be the compass. You let joy be your direction. Your soul does not lead you away from people. It leads you toward truth. And sometimes truth creates space. Sometimes it clears the room. But never with cruelty, only with clarity. You begin to notice that the people who remain in your life are the ones who meet you at soul level. They are not threatened by your boundaries. They don't require you to shrink. They resonate not with the mask you used to wear, but with the truth you've returned to. When the soul leads, relationships change. Careers change. Environments change. And yet nothing is lost, only realigned. The things and people that stay do so not out of obligation, but because they match your new frequency. You are no longer dragging your life behind you like an old story. You are writing a new one from presence, not performance. As you begin living from soul instead of ego, the concept of boundaries becomes sacred. No longer are boundaries rigid walls born from fear or pain. They become clear lines drawn from self-love. Not because you are angry, but because you are aware of your value. You stop sacrificing your peace to be liked. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You no longer volunteer for emotional labor that drains your spirit. You no longer accept crumbs and call it connection. You realize that your time, your energy, your body, your attention, they are sacred resources, and not everyone is meant to have access to them. You begin to audit your life not out of judgment, but out of clarity. You ask yourself, does this person or experience honor who I am now? Does this feed my growth, or does it recreate my wounding? You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop defending your limits. You hold them not as weapons, but as offerings, as signposts that say, here is where my truth lives. And yes, some people will leave. Some will be offended by the clarity you now possess. But those who are meant for your path will remain not because you contort for them, but because you no longer do. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They are containers for it. They create the structure in which authenticity can flourish. They protect what is sacred not just from others, but from yourself, your own old habits of overgiving, overextending, and overcompensating. The rise of sacred boundaries is not the end of your connection to others. It is the beginning of your connection to truth. By now you've started to notice something strange. Your external life is beginning to shift, not because you forced it, but because your energy has changed. You are no longer vibrating with fear, shame, or scarcity. You are no longer attracting from desperation. You are no longer radiating the need to be rescued. You have become magnetic not because you are trying to be, but because truth has a frequency. And you are now aligned with it. This frequency shift isn't loud, it's subtle. Others may not be able to name it, but they feel it. They respond to it. Some draw near, others drift away. But you are no longer adjusting yourself to manage their responses. You let things fall into place or fall away. The people who show up in your life now feel different. The conversations feel richer. The silences feel sacred. The opportunities arrive not through effort, but through alignment. You no longer hustle to be seen. You are content to be real. You no longer chase. You attract not by manipulating, but by radiating. This isn't magic. This is resonance. This is what happens when you no longer live in contradiction with your essence. When your choices, your words, your actions, and your energy all point in the same direction, inward, homeward, truthward. Everything changes when your frequency changes, not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped resisting who you really are. There comes a time in your inner evolution when life stops being a stage and you stop being an actor performing for an unseen audience. You no longer chase applause. You no longer rehearse lines designed to make others love you. You step off the stage altogether. You begin living from your center. The soul-centered life isn't glamorous. It isn't loud. It is rooted in simplicity. You don't need accolades to feel important. You don't need others to get you in order to feel valid. You are no longer waiting to be invited to someone else's table. You've realized you were always the host of your own life. This life begins with presence, with noticing what feels authentic, aligned, honest. It doesn't follow trends. It follows resonance. And sometimes that means walking away from crowds to hear your own voice again. Living from the soul means prioritizing peace over popularity. It means being more interested in congruence than convenience. It means choosing integrity over image. And it is not always easy. People may not understand this new version of you. They may miss the old roles you played. They may question your choices, your distance, your silence. But that's okay. You're not here to perform. You're here to be. The soul-centered life is not a life of isolation. It is a life of intimacy. Intimacy with your breath, your truth, your being. You become more selective, not because you're judgmental, but because your energy has become sacred. You no longer offer it to those who don't treat it as such. From this place, everything you do becomes prayer. Every step is a return. Every word is a mirror of the stillness within. You've come home, and you're no longer leaving yourself behind. Before, relationships were mirrors. You looked to others to show you who you were. If they smiled, you smiled back. If they frowned, you questioned yourself. You shaped your behavior to avoid rejection, to invite belonging, to maintain peace. But as you evolve, the mirror becomes unnecessary. You no longer need someone's love to feel lovable. You no longer need someone's presence to feel seen. You no longer need someone to choose you to feel chosen. That doesn't mean you've stopped loving people. It means you've stopped needing them to reflect your worth. Now love becomes an offering, not a transaction. Now connection becomes a choice, not a dependency. You don't seek relationships to complete you. You engage in them to expand you. This is a radical shift. Because when the mirror shatters, so do the illusions. The illusion that someone else can save you. The illusion that your value is tied to their attention. The illusion that their approval is your compass. You begin to see people not as saviors or threats, but as souls just like you. Some are meant to walk with you. Some are meant to walk past you. And both are sacred. You no longer bend yourself to be understood. You no longer shrink yourself to be accepted. You meet people as you are. And if they see you, truly see you, it is a gift, not a requirement. Without the mirror, you become the reflection. You radiate your wholeness not through perfection, but through presence. You no longer ask, do they love me? You ask, am I showing up with love? And in that question, you become free. Most people were taught love through the lens of sacrifice, attachment, or possession. Love meant losing yourself for another. Love meant tolerating pain in exchange for proximity. Love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel big enough to stay. But that is not love. That is emotional entanglement. As you walk this path of inner clarity, you begin to redefine love. You strip it of drama. You take the urgency out of it. You remove the expectation, the need to be completed, the desperation to be chosen. You begin to experience love not as an escape, but as an enhancement. Love without entanglement is spacious. It breathes. It honors the other person as they are not as who you need them to be. It doesn't come with chains. It doesn't whisper fears. It doesn't trap. It invites. It supports. It holds without holding back. You stop trying to change people. You stop expecting them to fill roles they never signed up for. You start meeting people as they are, and you let their soul decide if the connection has life. If it does, you celebrate. If it doesn't, you release with gratitude, not resentment. Love in its highest form asks for nothing. It offers everything. It doesn't cling. It doesn't demand. It simply is. This is not the love you were shown in movies or childhood dynamics. This is divine love. Unconditional. Boundaried. Free. You can walk away from someone and still love them. You can love someone deeply and still not stay. Because you understand now, love is not the same as compatibility. Love is not the same as alignment. Love is not the same as purpose. And the most honest form of love sometimes says, I see you, I cherish you, and I cannot walk this path with you. That is not failure. That is sacred discernment. By now, you've shed layers. You've released roles. You've stepped away from people, places, and patterns that once defined your world. And though this path may seem quiet on the surface, it is roaring underneath. Your entire energetic field is transforming. You no longer chase healing. You no longer demand clarity. You are learning to let life speak for itself. You are learning to trust the unfolding, not force it. And because of this, you are now moving with life, not against it. You don't need a 5-year plan to feel safe. You don't need a title to feel worthy. You don't need a partner to feel loved. You have become the source. And this changes everything. People begin to feel you before you speak. Rooms begin to shift as you enter, not because of arrogance, but because your energy is rooted. You're no longer broadcasting desperation. You're no longer leaking energy. You're simply being. There's a stillness in your steps now, a softness in your eyes, a lightness in your laughter. Not because your life is perfect, but because your inner world is no longer at war. This transformation is not about being above others. It's about being so aligned with yourself that you no longer participate in what isn't real. You no longer argue with projection. You no longer play roles you've outgrown. You show up as you are, and you let that be enough. That is power. Silent, unwavering, grounded power. Peace is no longer something you search for, it is something you embody. You don't meditate to escape the world. You meditate to anchor yourself in it. You don't journal to fix yourself. You journal to remember. You don't sit in silence because you're broken. You sit in silence because that is where your strength returns. You no longer confuse numbness with calm. You no longer confuse comfort with safety. You understand now that true peace isn't the absence of noise, it is the presence of clarity even in the noise. You are no longer shaken by every storm. You don't collapse under emotional waves. You ride them. You bless them. You thank them for their message and then release them. This is not stoicism. This is embodiment. Your nervous system no longer lives in fight or flight. Your inner child no longer begs for attention. Your ego no longer panics at silence. There is a new baseline now, and it is peace. From here, you stop reacting to life. You respond. You don't make decisions in urgency. You wait for the wave to settle and then you choose. You're no longer addicted to fixing, solving, controlling. You're learning to allow. And ironically, in that allowing, everything aligns faster, more gracefully, more fully. You don't have to yell your boundaries. You don't have to defend your evolution. You don't have to fight to be understood. Your presence does the talking. Your energy does the walking. Your peace becomes your protection. And as you continue walking this path, no longer needing, no longer chasing, no longer proving, you discover something profound. Peace was never outside of you. It was always who you were underneath the noise, waiting to be remembered. You've come to the edge. The old story is behind you, the one where you were the victim, the hero, the seeker, the survivor. You've told it 1,000 times. You've clung to it like armor. You've let it define your relationships, your choices, your worth. But something within you is no longer interested in repeating the narrative. You're not erasing your past. You're just refusing to let it script your future. This is a radical act, not because you deny what happened, but because you've stopped assigning it power. You're no longer saying, "This is who I am because of what I've been through." Instead, you're saying, "What I've been through has shaped me, but it no longer controls me." The past has become soil, not chains. You understand now that healing does not mean rewriting your story to make it prettier. It means rising above the story altogether, observing it, honoring it, but not living from it. This is where the ego panics, because the ego thrives on identity, and identity thrives on stories. Without your old wounds, who are you? Without your roles, what remains? The answer is simple presence, essence, being. You are not here to be defined. You are here to be. The more you release the need to narrate yourself, the more space you create for the soul to lead. Life becomes less about explanation and more about experience. You no longer need others to get your journey. You're too busy living it. And in doing so, you become unpredictable in the most beautiful way. No longer a character stuck in a script, but a living embodiment of truth, free to respond, free to evolve, free to simply exist without performance. It's tempting to think awakening is all light clarity, peace, radiance. But no real evolution happens without shadow. No depth is possible without darkness. To awaken fully, you must descend. You must face the parts of you you've hidden, hated, or denied. This is not self-sabotage. This is self-integration. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the unaccepted, the exiled parts of you. The fear you didn't feel, the grief you repressed, the rage you covered in politeness, the envy you swallowed whole, the need you were told made you weak. To become whole, you must reclaim them. This isn't glamorous. It's gritty. It's painful. Sometimes it feels like dying because, in a sense, it is. The death of who you thought you had to be. The death of the mask. The death of the pleasing, performing self. You will want to run. You will want to bypass. You will want to say, "I've already healed this." But the shadow doesn't leave until it is held. Not fixed. Not changed. Just held. Shadow work isn't about purification. It's about integration. It's not about making yourself perfect. It's about becoming whole. You start to understand that your triggers are not problems, they are invitations. They show you where you are not yet free. They reveal the contracts you still have with pain. And every time you meet them with awareness instead of resistance, a new part of your power is restored. Eventually, the shadow becomes your teacher. The very thing you avoided becomes the thing that guides you. You learn to sit with discomfort, to breathe through your darkness, to let the raw, messy truth of your humanity coexist with your divinity. And when you do something beautiful, happens compassion. For yourself, for others, for the human condition. You stop judging. You start seeing. You stop dividing. You start weaving. Because true light does not fear the dark. It transforms it. Something deeper is happening not just within you, but around you. You're not the only one feeling the shift. All over the world, people are waking up. Quietly, gradually, authentically. A movement is unfolding, a remembering. Not because someone told them to, but because the soul cannot stay asleep forever. This is the collective awakening. We have been taught separation. We have lived in systems built on fear, scarcity, competition. But those illusions are crumbling. The old paradigms of power, control, and conformity are dying. And in their place, a new consciousness is emerging, one rooted in truth, in presence, in unity. It doesn't look like a revolution. It looks like people choosing differently, speaking more honestly, setting boundaries, asking deeper questions, walking away from what doesn't resonate, choosing to heal instead of harm. These choices may seem small, but they are not. Every boundary you set, every truth you speak, every time you honor your soul instead of your conditioning, you ripple into the collective. Your inner work is not selfish. It is sacred service. You become a frequency holder, a mirror for others to remember, a lighthouse in a world that is still learning how to see. You are not here to save the world. You are here to be in harmony with it, to remember that there is no other, that we are threads in the same web, that healing yourself heals the field, that love is not a theory, it is a frequency. As more of us awaken, the structures must shift. They cannot hold the weight of awakening souls. And while there will be resistance, while the world may seem to burn before it rebuilds, remember this: you are not alone. You never were. And the more you return to yourself, the more you strengthen the grid, the web of awakening that is holding this planet steady as it sheds its skin. Once your life was shaped by reaction. Someone said something, you defended. Something happened, you collapsed. You were tossed by waves you didn't know how to name, trapped in patterns you thought were your personality. Now you are centered. You don't fight every battle. You don't explain every decision. You don't react to every opinion. This is not because you don't feel. It's because you are no longer driven by what you feel. You've learned to pause, to breathe, to wait for the fog to clear before you move. You've learned that urgency is often a trauma response. That silence speaks louder than rebuttals. That peace is louder than noise. You have become the calm, not because life has become easy, but because you've become spacious. You've created room within yourself, room to choose, room to see clearly, room to discern what is yours and what is not. Now you respond from your essence, not from your wound. Now you speak not to win, but to connect. You move not to impress, but to express. You give not to gain, but to share. This is true power, the ability to act from love when it would be easier to react from fear. You no longer burn your energy trying to convince people. You no longer chase closure. You trust that what's meant for you is already on its way, not because you're passive, but because you're aligned. Living from center means you are no longer governed by the external world. You are no longer playing emotional ping pong with other people's projections. You are no longer outsourcing your stability. You carry it with you. And from this place, everything begins to organize around your clarity. Life bends toward presence. Opportunities arise without struggle. Relationships deepen without drama. Because when you no longer live in reaction, you finally begin to live in truth. This is the end of a cycle, but it is not the end of the path. It is a beginning. Not the kind marked by fireworks, but the kind you feel in your bones. A quiet turning inward. A sacred homecoming. You are no longer a seeker. You are a rememberer. The self you were searching for was never lost. It was just buried under conditioning, under trauma, under the noise of a world that taught you to look everywhere except within. But you have returned. You are no longer chasing enlightenment. You are living embodied. You no longer romanticize healing. You understand it as the daily, gritty, holy work of coming back to your body, your breath, your truth. You have learned to sit in silence without fleeing, to love without clinging, to cry without shame, to speak without shrinking, to walk without pretending. You are not a persona. You are presence. You are not a role. You are reality. You are not a performance. You are poetry. And this realization changes everything, not just how you live, but how you love, how you lead, how you rest. You no longer need a title to feel whole. You no longer need a partner to feel safe. You no longer need approval to feel seen. You are whole. Not because you fixed yourself, but because you remembered you were never broken. Your presence is medicine now. Your voice carries truth. Your silence carries power. Your being carries peace. And as you walk forward from this place, from this truth, you walk differently. Not because life will never challenge you again, but because you will never abandon yourself again. You've crossed a threshold. You've made peace with your shadow. You've integrated your story. You've chosen love over fear, presence over performance, truth over illusion. And now every breath you take echoes one quiet truth. You are home.